Hi everyone! Today we will have a lecture load, outer and inner load, training methods, load and adaptation. During this time we will go through a brief presentation how can we workload be defined and what conditions could be defined, what training methods. Shortly we will go through training methods can be applied in order to develop a particular physical abilities, conditioning or skills development. And firstly, let's consider the concept of load, outer and inner load. So outer load or workload describes the kind and extent of outer influence on a human being. It describes tasks from a physical, psychological and intellectual point of view. Inner load or load effect describes how individual performance preconditions are used in order to perform an activity. All these trigger adaptation process that describes how the organism adjusts to defined stimuli. The process can be proven for the athlete's conditioning with regard to metabolism and morphology. These three concepts are key and fundamental aspects of the consideration of the load. Workload could be adjusted, for example, when we go to the gym, performing manipulation with load, with free weights, with machines. So, for example, if we are performing movement with some weights that has a 20 kg, so this is the outer load, workload. But each of us has a unique and individual strength endurance development. So due to these peculiarities we can demonstrate different load effect or inner load. That means, for example, that more experienced athlete can work with 20 kg in a moderate intensity, while the other athlete who is quite a new in powerlifting or strength endurance training could actually demonstrate high intensity. So this is the load effect. Load effect could be different, and load effect depends not only from the outer load but also from different factors. Those factors could be psychological state of mind, concentration, overall feeling, energy resources, and in combination with these two outcomes of training as outer load and inner load, we can induce adaptation process. Adaptation is the fundamental regularity that allow our organism and body to adjust to a particular stimuli, and this process is absolutely necessary for our conditioning and metabolic reaction and change in our morphology or physiology. Adaptation is the key for our physiological existence, survival. So everything that is quite different in the nature that surrounds us, for example, or the nature that inside us, for example, homeostasis could be changing from time to time, and adaptation process starts in order to optimize, to adjust all these changes, to make our functioning much more stable. Let's have a look on the model of the correlation between outer load, inner load, and the development of sport performances. Outer load induces the effect of inner load, and inner load transforms into the development of performance. But what's happen when the outer load is too low, so the intensity below the moderate, or not workload at all? So it induces actually not challenging enough situation when no adaptation could be triggered, started. And in the development of, for example, sport performance, we can observe stagnation or even degradation. For example, if we used to go to the gym and worked with weights, increase our strength endurance, and increase our muscle hypertrophy, but during some time when we didn't participate in this kind of training, we could observe stagnation or even degradation. Even exercising, but the workload could be below the low level, the moderate level. It could be not high enough to maintain the muscle tissue at the same state. And degradation in this case could be, for example, be presented as a muscle atrophy. So actually losing muscle mass, because our organism decides that there is no reason to spend energy, resources to maintain the same volume of muscle mass. So it will be reduced. Another situation when outer load could be medium or close to the high level of workload. In this case, inner load or the effect of load will be optimal, and this could lead to development of performance capacity. Another option is extremely high outer load, very intensive, and it could lead to overload situation or overtraining. Actually, this kind of load could be quite dangerous and harmful for our organism, especially for our heart and cardiovascular system. And by possessing a specific knowledge about physical training and experience, we can actually try to manipulate all these three levels of outer load or workload and avoid extremely high workload, because it could lead to trauma and injuries, and sometimes unrepairable injuries. So this is quite important, very important. That's why I strongly recommend you to communicate with a coach or a gym instructor to elaborate a training plan, to design it in order to plan only low or medium level of intensities, because extremely high intensity could be could lead to serious negative consequences for organism. And what happened in the development of performance if we apply extremely high training workload? The same: stagnation, degradation, and injuries. So this is the worst scenario that could happen if you are working in the gym and in a not appropriate way. And now let's have a look on this classification. The name is FIT. That means frequency, intensity, time, and time. And the reference for this classification you can also see here. And let's go through each of these element. And this structure allows us to comprehend it more complex and step by step. Safe and effective physical activity program design, they call it in this way. And basic training principles are the scientific concepts that underlie program design decisions. So by possessing a specific knowledge, skills, experience, we are able to apply scientific data to as the basis for training plan development. And these guidelines, FIT guidelines, represent the key decisions that need to be made to address an individual's physical activity and health-related fitness needs. So, frequency describes how often a person performs the target physical activity. For each component of health-related fitness, the beneficial and safe frequency is generally 3 to 5 days per week. And aerobic fitness activities can be performed all or most days of the week. This component frequency is quite individual because it reflects our capacities and abilities. Some of us has inherent more high level of endurance, some strength endurance, and so on. And considering these characteristics, we can adjust our training plan more precisely, more correctly. Intensity. It describes how hard a person exercises and represents one of the most critical decisions in program design. The selection of appropriate exercise intensity depends on a number of factors, including the participant's developmental readiness, personal goals, and current physical activity and fitness levels. Intensity stands opposite to the volume. So just imagine load that you can adjust on a training session, and this load divided on two parts. One part is volume and another is intensity. Volume, it could be represented by the number of repetitions, distance, for example, when we run or swim, and time. And if we enlarge distance, for example, for running, of course intensity will be limited, decreased. And the opposite, if we try to run faster, of course the distance will be shorter. So this negative correlation that could be taken in account. Time or duration describes how long the activity should be performed. And time, the duration of training session, could sometimes represent our endurance. The more stamina we have, the longer the duration of the training session could be. Also, this time of training session could represent the ability to recover faster or slower after each training set, or to recover from training session to another training session. Sometimes 24 hours is enough to recover completely, but sometimes not. Sometimes we need more time. And also the type of training, what kind of method we applied, also can be a powerful factor that diminish the time of our training or the time necessary for our recovery. Type. It refers to mode or what kind of activity a person chooses to perform. For example, a student may improve aerobic fitness by walking, cross-country skiing, or inline skating. Muscular fitness may be developed by contracting a muscle or a muscle group against an external resistance provided by free weights, variable resistance machines, body weight, or medicine balls. Basic training principles. There are 5 distinguished training principles. One is overload, the second progression, other specificity, other regularity, and individuality. Those principles describe how the body responds to the physiological stress of physical activity across all 5 components of health-related fitness. That could be aerobic fitness, muscular strength, muscular endurance, flexibility, and body composition. And the reference for the source you can find also at the top of this slide. If you are interested, you can find it on the internet and applying, for example, Google Scholar search engine, and find it. And now let's consider each of these basic principles in more details. So the overload principle states that a body system, for example cardiorespiratory, muscular, or skeletal, must be stressed beyond what it is accustomed to in order to bring about a desired training adaptation. So let's go back for the previous slide, because overload principle is relevant for this picture. If outload too low, so it's not challenging enough, no adaptation could be started, it could lead actually to stagnation and regression. That's why overload principles should be maintained. That workload should be medium to high, and this is the best option because it brings optimal inner workload, how our body to react actually to this outload, and this allows us to develop performance capacity, to get stronger, to enhance our endurance, and so on. Another principle is the progression principle. It indicates that an overload must be increased over time in gradual manner to remain effective and safe. The specificity principle states that physical activities that produce training adaptations by stressing a particular body part or system do little to affect other body parts or systems. That means that exercises should be specified for a particular purpose. For example, if we are working on our abdominal muscles, we should choose a particular exercises correspondingly. If we are working on our endurance, we prefer to choose cyclic types of exercises like running, bicycling, or swimming, and so on. The regularity principle, based on the old adage, use it or lose it. It states that physical activity must be performed on a regular basis to be effective. Regularity means that 2 or 3 times a week we have a training sessions, but it doesn't mean that all these 2 or 3 training sessions should be at the same day, but despite it, it should be with interval for the rest period, like 24 or 48 hours for recovery. This is implication of regularity principle. And another scenario is that training sessions could be performed during first weeks, but after that, probably because gym under reconstruction or not no opportunities to perform weightlifting, we can miss several weeks of training, and after that we go to the another gym and we continue our training sessions. But this is not a regularity principle introduced in our training life, because we actually had a break of training session, and after that we started again. But the regularity principle means that we apply exercises. Sometimes we change these exercises in order to maintain a particular level of physical activity, or work on other groups of muscles of our body. The individuality principle takes into account that people into the physical activity programs with different biological potentials for change, personal goals and interests, current activity patterns, fitness levels, psychosocial characteristics, and environmental determinants. So individuality and our uniqueness is the fundamental aspect of our training plan. If we will not consider our individual characteristics, we can actually overload ourselves, so induce overtraining, and actually bring a harmful effect on our body, on our organism. Or another way, it could be on the other hand, it could be workload that is characterized by very low, below moderate intensity, that can induce actually no effect, no adaptation, so no profit of this kind of exercise. So, but knowing our individuality, we can adjust precisely what is the best option of workload is for us, what is the moderate intensity for us. And this moderate intensity, actually this kind of exercise could vary from time to time. It depends on many factors, like our, for example, attitude for training, season of the year, our general fatigue or recovery, and so on. Each training session consists of components of physical activity, and whatever kind of training should we perform or are we planning, at the first it should be warm-up procedure. Warm-up is a low intensity activity done before a full effort and should be organized to meet the goals of the main physical activity. The primary purpose of the warm-up is to prepare the participant for the moderate to vigorous physical activity. that will occur during the session. For example, a person intending to engage in a vigorous physical activity like a game of a full-court basketball would need to complete a more thorough warm-up than someone simply going out for a brisk walk. And the same principle should be with the implementation of other kinds of sport. So strength training needs a specific warm-up, and the same with swimming or running. Warm-up offers the following benefits. It increases active muscle blood flow, increases blood flow to the heart, rises body temperature, and may reduce the risk of muscular injury and soreness. Also, it facilitates temperature regulation by causing earlier sweating. The next is the main physical activity part. It represents the core of the lesson physical activity session and is intended to improve or maintain one or more of the health-related fitness components. The frequency, intensity, time and type of physical activity depend on the goals of the lesson, the length of the class period, and the current fitness level of individual students. Actually, at the beginning of any training session or physical education classes at a university, a coach, instructor or teacher introduce the main topic and highlights the core, the main set of this class, and it facilitates of collaboration between teacher and students or athletes in achieving a particular training goal. For example, it could be development of volleyball skills, and knowing that this is the core of this training session, athletes or students will pay attention and focus more on specific exercises during warming up procedure. After main physical activity part follows cool down, and a proper cool down includes a period of light activity following exercise that allows the body to slow down and return to near resting levels. The body needs this gradual recovery following exercise to reduce muscle stiffness and soreness, remove lactic acid, and prevent lightheadedness, dizziness, or even fainting. Stretching exercises should also be performed during the cool down because muscles are warmest and most pliable then, providing maximum benefit toward improving flexibility. So, about the time, let's talk about the time of these parts. Well, cool down, sometimes it takes 5 minutes, sometimes 15, it depends actually, but it is absolutely necessary part of training, and the more correctly and efficiently performing cool down part of the training, the more the faster you will recover after training. And warming up also could take from 10 to 20 minutes. It depends actually from your conditioning level, the type of training, and the overall time of training. This time could be 45, 1 hour or 2 hours, and it will actually affect the overall time of warming up and cool down. Warming up is essential part at the beginning of the training because it actually brings us a powerful tool to secure our body from risk or reduce the risk of trauma, of injury, because our cardiovascular system are activated and our skeletal muscles activated too. The body temperature rises and the intra and intermuscular coordination activated as well. And all these numerous and complex physiological mechanisms are so tiny and at the same time so necessary that missing them could lead us to a disastrous situation with trauma or injury and so on. By the way, if our goal setting for a particular training is to achieve a particular goal, to jump higher, for example, or run faster, a proper warm-up could bring us closer to this goal setting realization. So this is very important parts. Well, this lesson is a short one because it was planned 45 minutes for this, and I would like you to, after the going through this lecture material, go to the control test and answer questions. And for now, let's start it over. Shortly go through all the information, all the schemes, and try to highlight the main concepts and facts of this lecture. So these three concepts are very important and critical. Load, outer load, you know what it is about. It's actually what that surround us, what we are dealing with in the nature. Free weights, track and field surface, water in swimming pool, bicycling when we are pedaling, and so on. And this workload influence how our body reacts to this. And this is the name of this parameter is inner load or load effect. Describes how individual performance preconditions are used, and by performance preconditions we mean our cardiovascular and respiratory systems, our muscles, our body itself, how it trained, what's the level of conditioning that we possess. It all matters for load effect. Another concept is adaptation. It describes how the organism adjusts to defined stimuli. So adaptation could be on different levels. It could be in morphological or physiological level. It could be at the level of the functioning of our central neural system, and so on. Adaptation is the fundamental mechanism. This scheme is also important, and you can come back to this figure from time to time, because it's quite simple, but it describes all this scenario when the outload could be low, medium, or extremely high. What it could be, what's the consequences, outcomes could be in each of these scenario. Fit guidelines: frequency, intensity, time, and time. Easy to remember and not so complicated, by the way. All these parameters could be applied to any kind of training and facilitate you to analyze it or to design it. Also, we studied basic training principles, of course, briefly, just mentioned them and the main characteristics. So overload, progression, specificity, regularity, and individuality. Overload. By overload, we mean training load that induce adaptation. Progression, that means from we steadily, step by step, should increase the workload because the previous one is not efficient enough to induce adaptation. Specificity means that each of the exercises work on a particular body muscle groups or our conditioning or abilities. For example, working on our strength endurance with our biceps could do very little with our endurance, general overall endurance. Then another one is the regularity principle. It means that we have a habit actually for physical training, for physical activity. If we break our training sessions plan, it will be a situation when for example degradation or stagnation will be at the top of the outcomes. And the individuality principle, it takes into account that people into the physical activity programs with different biological potential, personal goals and interests, or current activity patterns, fitness level, and so on. A lot of characteristics should be taken in account when we are dealing with individuality principle. After that, we considered the main parts or components of physical activity session. We started with warm-up. The main benefits you can see on the slide. It increases active muscle blood flow, increases blood flow to the heart, raises body temperature, and it could eventually reduce the risk of muscle injury and soreness, and it facilitates temperature regulation by causing earlier sweating. All these outcomes are very important. The next one was the main physical activity part. It deals with our goal setting. It could be developing of our endurance, strength endurance, or improving our skills like a volleyball or basketball skills, how we throwing the ball and or interacting with the team. It also could be a goal in a training session. So the purpose of this training directs actually the specificity of warming up and cool down. So this is important. And the final one is the cool down part. So it includes light activity and it facilitates recovery, lactic acid removal, prevent dizziness, even fainting, and also during cool down is more rewarding to work on the flexibility. This is it. I hope you a good day or evening, and please go to the control test and answer questions. And if you have any questions, you can write me messages on the Moodle platform. I will answer this. And we have 2 lessons more. It will be on Monday and Tuesday, so at the same time. So see you next time. Bye bye.